And here we are with our brand new TV series, TV review series, Say No More Xenomorph. Yes, that's right. Earth's Mightiest critics are back, and we're going to be talking about the new Disney FX, Hulu, God knows what else, TV series, Alien Earth, which debuted a couple of nights ago. This flashes back to a few years ago. We used to do regular series on the latest Star Wars and Marvel shows, but then they became less and less worth discussing, much less watching, in some not so humble opinions. And so we kind of took a break from that. But now we have Alien Earth. I'm a huge fan of the universe, going back to Ridley Scott and James Cameron's visionary takes on the deep space exploration and the monsters that come back with people. And over the years, they've had a number of sequels and prequels and other media and comics and video games and stuff. So the timeline has gotten kind of convoluted. And now what we have here is a series that takes place 2 years before the events of 1979's Alien, but sometime after the prequel series Prometheus and Covenant, and about 42 years before the events of Alien Romulus, which was the big hit from last summer. So if you're very confused, we actually have a timeline which I can pull up. Oh wait, it's not there. Oh no, where did it go? Sorry, I got into this StreamYard studio a little bit ago, and the graphics did not transport. So just trust me on the timeline. I'll see if I can post it elsewhere, because it was very nifty. I'm bummed I can't find it. But anyhow, what I'd like to do, besides introduce the series, which I've just done, is introduce Earth's Mightiest critics. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of Special Mark Productions and the Spoiler Room podcast, and Jeff York of the Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists. Good evening, gentlemen. How you doing?
Very good.
Good. Mark, you've got the I just watched both of the first 2 episodes of Alien Earth look on your face. Very similar to the one that I had 2 nights ago.
Actually, you would be right. I literally finished it 10 minutes ago.
Wow. Okay. So you're fresh off of it, which is great.
Yeah.
I think
Hold on just a second. Okay, let's do this.
All right. Well, folks, if you watch the regular Kicking the Seat movie live streams, you'll know that they tend to go on for quite a while, an hour plus. We're going to try something a little bit different with these shows and get them down to about a half hour, maybe 40 minutes, maybe a little bit longer tonight, because we're talking about the 2 premiere episodes of this series. But we want to just give you a synopsis and kind of our thoughts on what is going on. And I think at the end of this 8-episode series, we might do a deeper dive, a full retrospective of what it all means. The tricky thing about doing episodic television that is released, week after week, like in the olden days, and not just, binge dropped, is that you really don't know where things are going. You might have questions that get resolved by the end of the whole thing, or there might just be lingering questions, i.e. plot holes that never get resolved, or at least you got to wait till season 2 if there is one, and who knows if that'll be 3 years from now, like they did with Wednesday. So we're just going to get all into it, and we're going to talk spoilers. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the spoiler banner here. I have a full-blown synopsis of the first 2 episodes. Episode 1, Neverland. Episode 2, Mr. October. So bear with me here as I breeze through this, and then we'll get to our thoughts on it. Episode 1, Neverland. The year is 2120. The crew of the Weyland-Yutani deep space vessel Maginot is awakened mid-flight. The crew has dinner, and then some of them go back into stasis as one of the scientists tinkers in a lab with nasty creatures. Back on Earth, the Prodigy Corporation island of Neverland, a terminally ill young girl has her consciousness transferred into a synthetic body and is remade as Wendy, courtesy of history's youngest trillionaire, Boy Cavalier. And yes, the metaphors and references only get more tortured from here. Having proved the procedure successful, Boy initiates the transfer of several other children's minds into synth bodies. Shortly after Wendy's emergence, we revisit the Maginot, which is in considerable distress. Only 2 crew members remain alive, one of whom turns out to be an android named Morrow. He allows the last human to die at the hands of the Xenomorph as he interfaces with the master computer Mother and prepares for a crash landing on Earth. The Maginot barrels through the Neverland's main city, prompting a hastily assembled search and rescue crew to investigate, among whose number is a doctor named Hermit, the older brother of the little girl who was once Wendy. Sensing her brother's imminent danger, Wendy convinces Boy and the android in charge of the cyber children, Kirsch, to allow the group to provide backup for search and rescue, reasoning that they're indestructible and therefore immune to alien threats or other dangers. Some more business goes on. There's a cliffhanger, and then we go into episode 2 called Mr. October. This episode is an extended room clearing episode in which the synths, the search and rescue team, and a newly emerged Morrow try to find their ways in, out, and around the Maginot wreckage while encountering a small but deadly number of otherworldly parasites that have gotten loose. Morrow gets the better of 2 guards and uses them as hosts for a worm parasite. Hermit and another guard encounter a French aristocracy-themed costume party in an apartment suite, which is quickly demolished by a xenomorph. Morrow captures the alien in a neat egg sack thing that would have been really handy in all these subsequent movies, but is never seen again. And Wendy and Hermit reunite. The truth of their relationship is revealed, and we end on the second of 2 cliffhangers set to incongruous to the universe rock music. So I may have missed some things, but that's what I took away from the first 2 episodes.
Good recap, sir.
Thank you. Gentlemen, what do we think of Alien Earth? Jeff, I kind of know your thoughts, so I want to start with Mark, the freshest off the show. Give it to us. From the mind of Noah Hawley. This has been a much vaunted and celebrated creator, and people are really excited about this project. Mark is a bona fide horror fan, and I assume a Xeno head. What did you make of Alien Earth?
Oh, I mean, I love Alien and Aliens. Alien 3, I know some people who really love that film, and I didn't. I paid money for it and came out in pain. I understand it a little better now, but still, and subsequent films after that, Resurrection was 85% really good till the very end. But, the subsequent sequels and then the prequels I like because they were odd. I like the prequels because they were a little bit different. I to various degrees, I liked them, though I didn't need an origin story for the eggs, which is what those were. So now we get this story that it's supposed to be canon, and it's supposed to be 2 years before the events of Alien, which I'm very curious how they're going to handle that. Right now, it's a ship in the bottle episode, and I love my genre stuff. I love my sci-fi stuff. I would say most of this, though, I was trying to figure out why the hype, in all honesty. And that may sound bad. It's not me trying to be elitist. I went in with open mind because a lot of people that I know that really like Alien are like, yeah, they're really into this and they're interested to see where that first episode fell flat for me. Because first off, I was trying to figure out exactly what's going on. At first, I thought we were doing a kind of forward and back thing where the young, kids who were getting transferred into the bodies were actually the people on the crew of the specimen containing, because they were very similar as far as the people that were employed and doing the tasks were very similar. So at first I thought, oh, these are just older versions of the folks that we are witnessing from that island. When I realized, oh no, these are happening at the same time, I'm like, okay. It was hitting so many familiar beats from the past films, though, that I'm like, you've got your corrupt, this time android versus synthetic, who is, acting out the orders of the company for protecting the specimens. Before it was the synth in the first Alien, but here, no, it's the android acting pretty much the same way, sacrificing his crew members. And then going on from there, I love the story of Wendy and the kids. I wanted more of that before they're just thrown into this situation with the aliens, because I was finding that fascinating. Kids' consciousness in adult bodies and them seeing them. I would have loved to see more of them dealing with that. I mean, our Wendy obviously had a strong head on her shoulders before she got transferred and now she seems to be a more advanced person, you know. So she's a fascinating character. I could care less about any of the other kids because we've not spent any time with them before we're thrown into okay, and then we get Xenomorph action, which, don't get me wrong, the alien looks great, but I'm not invested in pretty much any of the characters outside of Wendy, and that's it. I just want to see Wendy, you know. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. I like Wendy, and I like Timothy Oliphant's character because I'm a huge Timothy stan. I love him in almost anything I've seen him in. I like his character here. I like his character interaction with Wendy. That's the only really interesting thing here outside of maybe the trillionaire. But I mean, it's only the first 2 episodes, but just for these first 2 episodes, it didn't grab me, but I was like, I'm curious about these characters. I don't care about anyone else.
Yeah. And there's quite a few anyone else's, but they turn out to be mostly, you know, dead meats from what we can kind of see. The search and rescue crew, and you know, we've got the assistant to Boyd who he kind of has these philosophical conversations with. But yeah, I mean, it's a long episode. Jeff, we were talking earlier today and you had pointed out that combined, these things are almost a 2.5-hour movie, and we have 6 of these left. So I don't know if they're all going to be the same runtime or if some are going to be kind of shorter like Disney does on their shows or what. But there's a lot to take in here, but it's not all interesting. I mean, as I was saying earlier today, you know, being a huge fan of the Dark Horse comics from the 90s and the movies going back to the 80s, if you'd told me that someday there'd be an Alien television series with all the money and production values thrown at it, that was going to be kind of R-rated and, you know, everything you'd want, and that I'd want to turn it off 15 minutes into the second episode, I wouldn't have believed you. But, you know, here we are. I hate to say it, I committed to doing this live stream series before watching Alien Earth, and we're going to stick it out. But I'm starting to question some life decision here. Jeff, jump in here. I know you weren't that crazy about it, but yeah, go into a bit of why, and you know, do you share Mark's kind of concerns? Do you have a thing to build on there?
I do. In fact, I share both of your concerns. I'm shocked that after so many versions of Alien that we are still bothering to have them staring gape-mouthed at eggs, and you know, we're still traipsing around in the dark, and we have military people who don't know how to shoot a weapon or act like soldiers, and you know, we've tossed in a little bit of the Towering Inferno here now, where the spaceship has crash landed into a big tall high-rise, and we've got different people trying to get out of elevators and from floor to floor, and you know, knocking on doors like, hey, we're evacuating the building. Oh, I'm sorry, but we're having this party, we can't do this. Ha ha. 2 minutes later, they're all dead. But the thing that I am shocked about is that I dare say I think they wasted the first 2 episodes, and it's only 8. They, to Mark's point, they don't spend enough time on what I think are the main characters we're supposed to be concerned about, and I don't think they set them up particularly well. Not only because, as Mark points out, they don't have any time, but the reason to put young people into a synth body, or anybody into a synth body, is immortality, is to live longer and to not be reliant on a body that's going to age and get hurt, or, you know, be prone to accidents, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're going to put young people who are all like, it looks like they're sick or ill, that's one thing. And then hey, I've got this new body, I'm somehow immortal or whatever. But what they really needed to do is make these kids geniuses, like ballsier and cooler and smarter. That's the one thing that they need to be. And then also they happen to be dying, so they would be amenable to going into these synth bodies and building, trading up, if you will, to their potential. Instead, other than Sydney Chandler as Wendy, they're kind of played as scared kids, which, how is that helpful to have them on any kind of rescue mission? They don't have experience. They don't know the lay of the land. They have no less than soldiers. They don't know what they're dealing with, and they have no life experience. Now, if these were like in the future, genius kids who at age 12 and 13 were so incredibly intelligent, they were like 150 years old in intelligence and being able to almost be computers themselves in what they retained and what they learned, and they were savvy and stuff like that. But maybe for some reason that made their bodies die quicker. That's interesting. Now you've got kids going in there who have this kind of guileless, sort of video game kind of pull to the audience that you want to watch this and sort of feel that, but you've got a reason for them in these bodies. Right now, there's no reason for them to be in there, and it seems silly, except the commercial appeal of, well, these are wink, wink kids, and it's kind of like a video game. The other thing is we waste tons of time going through all the alien lore that to me is not interesting. And I hate to say this, Ian and Mark, but as I was watching the shows, because they dragged on for a good hour and a half, that first one, and almost as long the second one, is I kept thinking, while they're all stumbling around in the dark, not knowing their ass from a hole in the ground and not even sure what to do with a weapon, what could you have done that would have been more fresh and interesting than how about the ship is coming back with all kinds of aliens, and the Xenomorph is just one of them. But there's other aliens that are coming here for whatever reason, to give us an advantage in the world or the galaxy, or to be used for good purposes. Maybe there's some good aliens in there. Maybe it's not just these awful creatures that we can't contain. And we know that's the story after a dozen different executions, including the comic books. Or have it not crash land, but land somewhere, and then the character of Morrow lets them out, so part of the experiment is seeing how they adapt to the world on their own and grow whatever from there. But instead, it's all these, broken pods and blood scattered everywhere, and here's the egg, and here's the thing sneaking into the ceilings, and by the time it comes undone, frozen as the statue in the middle of the lobby or whatever that elevator scene in the apartment building, I thought, we've seen all this before, and it's been done well, and Noah Hawley is smart enough to know how to shoot it well and create a certain amount of maybe surprise for the uninitiated. But there's so much more they should be doing with this that they aren't yet. Now, I will just say this in quickly. My hope, because Noah Hawley, I think, has shown with what he did with taking basically the tenets of Fargo and turning it into original stories and things that did not rely so much on the lore and kind of went in their own way, but they had a same sense of sort of black comedy that the Coen brothers' original movie Fargo did. I'm hoping he does that here. And I'm curious because at the beginning they say there's three kinds of, sort of synthetics or whatever that are being developed. AIs, the synthetics, which are kind of new, and then the cyborgs. Okay, that's interesting, because I thought, oh, wait a minute. Maybe that's what the title Alien Earth means. This Xenomorph is just one of the aliens. These are all the three new versions of who's going to take over the planet, arrested away from us, poor fallible humans. That could be interesting if they go there. But if it just becomes Danny Glover running around town fighting off the aliens in a modern setting, or something that's recognizable as a urban landscape, yawn. They better not go there, because they might as well just rerun any of the other things they've already done. The one thing that is funny too, I thought of after we talked to Ian, is if you looked at Alien was a very, very slow build. It really was. I mean, it's a good half an hour before they really get into anything other than the face hugger attacking John Hurt's helmet. And then, slowly but surely, we're given these pieces of it. But we get to know the characters well and what their mission is, and they're not prepared for this. And at first you think Sigourney Weaver's bad because she won't let them in, even though that's the protocol. And then even with aliens, it's like, okay, it's a long time before we get on that planet. And they go in there and they're exploring. We're getting to know some of these soldiers, and there's a lot of them, but we're getting to know the dynamics. And then the big surprise there is it's aliens with a plural. What is the surprise here? Right now, we've got one alien, and he's laid some eggs, or she's laid some eggs, or whatever the hell you want to call it. And we've got these kids in these synth bodies, which we don't know, to Mark's point, enough about them. How is that going to play out and be different? That's what I'm hoping Noah Hawley brings to the party. I'm hoping that was what the pitch was, that after you get kind of through the stuff that we all recognize seems too familiar, there'll be some fresh and exciting things happening. But I got to say, for people like us who are fans of Alien, and all the things that we've talked about made Alien and Aliens and some of the better parts of it from the other movies and comic books. What a wasted two episodes were these first ones. I mean, it's almost a third in, and you've shown me nothing really new. Even the synth thing, as nice as that is, the Timothy Olyphant character, he's playing Lance Henriksen. He's playing Ash. I get that. And he's good. He's very good. And, he's lean, and he's got a kind of sinisterness to him. You don't know if he's good or bad. You think he's good, but he's kind of unemotional with the kids. That's a nice angle. And, so far, the Wendy deal with her brother might create something. We know those are obviously the two main characters who will probably be our sort of ins through the show. But after all these years and all these executions, I'm shocked that they went with basically a greatest hits kind of melody.
I am too, especially because we just came off of Romulus. Now I
Right.
know these were kind of in development concurrently, so it's not like Romulus came out and they started working on Alien Earth. It's been in the works for a while,
Right.
but it is that same kind of, we're just going to show you everything that we've shown you before, even stuff that doesn't work in the in the context of the universe that we're building. Like in Romulus, there's the famous "Get away from her, you bitch," which was a line from a character and a sequence of events that wouldn't happen for like decades later. So it's like, what are we doing here? This is just made for, not even for fans, because I think the fans, the true Alien fans, watched that and they said, no, that doesn't make any sense. That was for like people who are even like less than casual. Like, I recognize those words. Here, to start off with just the filmmaking, the opening of this is literally the opening of the first Alien, but on like 1x5 speed and without nearly the competent filmmaking. You have the ship waking up, Mother's computer language reflected in the helmets, the opening, and even the cross dissolves of the pods going right into the dinner scene, where you've got the regular crew, and then off in the corner you've got the two grunt engineers, and they're complaining to each other about, I don't think it's shares in this one, but it's something to do with the cargo. No, it was the one guy's like, yeah, we lost a lot of good people trying to get this cargo, which are the catalog of aliens that they're bringing back. And there are different kinds of aliens on this ship. But to your point, Jeff, it'd be interesting if at some point during the series they find a way to maybe use them against the other aliens. Not to say that there's good ones or bad ones, because I think the whole point of this series is they're just forces of nature, and it's mankind with its consciousness and conscience and lack thereof that causes the big problems with these things. But I don't have any confidence in this series so far, and I didn't see Fargo, I didn't see Legion, I don't know anything about Noah Hawley except for this work, and so far I don't see the hype. As far as the Wendy character, it's odd because we spend a few moments with her and Timothy Oliphant, with the girl who would become Wendy, the kind of cancer stricken, she's bald, she looks very sickly. They're talking about a scorpion in a glass cage and kind of having this philosophical conversation about it. And then there's the consciousness transfer. But when we encounter Wendy, the new synth, she seems to have regressed from like maybe a 12-year-old girl who's got a pretty good head on her shoulders and is facing death to like a 5-year-old. I mean, to the point where, first of all, when we see one of the earliest scenes we see of her in this new body is she's like doing the Tom Cruise thing from Mission Impossible 2, where she's up on the side of a mountain and she gets called down. She jumps several hundred feet and does everything except land in the superhero pose, says, hey to her handler, and then darts off down the beach, in a complete CGI trot. I'm like, okay, are these things now made of adamantium? I don't know what we're talking about here. But when she decides to go help out, her brother, she runs to her room, snaps the blade part off of a paper cutter, and then takes like a stuffed teddy bear wallet or something and stuffs it in her belt loop. And then she's like, we're gonna go save my brother. I'm like, all of these kids, they're supposed to be, just about preteens, maybe, I don't even know if the oldest is 13 years old, but they are all regressed childlike children. And to the point where we get to the ship and they all turn into Veronica Cartwright from the first Alien. They're scared, they're huddled. There's even one girl, the redhead, who looks kind of like her. I'm like, what? I don't know why
why are they there? Why would they be helpful other than they can't be traditionally killed, but they could have their heads ripped off or in half like Lance Henriksen's character and then become useless. So I'm not sure what the intellectual capability, let alone the true physical capability that these Rough Rider kids have as these new synths that are going to do better than the soldiers who are armed to the teeth.
And go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
Yeah, the trillionaire genius boy of Prodigy, which is the fifth company now that we've introduced, which is they're all made of synth folks except the trillionaire, I guess. needed a montage with them, with the kids enjoying their new body and finding their specialty and becoming warriors so you could send them. Otherwise, I agree. The decision of sending them with Wendy, who seemed to have been designed, and even they make mention of it very briefly, like everything else in here, of her being more advanced with a supercomputer, and that, you know, boy genius, as they refer to him, kind of tailored her so that she would become really super knowledgeable and everything, and that he could actually have a reasonable conversation with someone who is smart or smarter than him, because that's what he was looking for, because nobody on this planet's smarter than him. So her going makes sense. Them sending everybody else with her made no sense, because she seemed to be the only one, even though she was more childlike, she still seemed the one that is more headstrong, straightforward, and have the most, like, not common sense, but way to put things together better than the rest of the kid group, who literally are still fresh in their bodies. So either you give me a montage to where, like you guys said, they all now have had their consciousness put into these bodies that have supercomputers in them, and now they're becoming geniuses and finding their specialties. Say one is a fighter, one is a guns expert, one computer, you know. Give me that montage, so you at least give me this special group of individuals who are going to, that you send. It makes sense to send to go help with this rescue and help these space Marines, who we've met space Marines before.
Well, I don't even know if they're space Marines. They're all hanging out on this building. I don't know if they're just like corporate cops or what. They're sent in as search and rescue, but
almost like security.
Right. Like security. Yeah, that's true.
But you know, problem number one, and we'll get back to Wendy and the kind of the issues there, but have we learned nothing from Covenant? Now, I understand it's a movie. So the people on this Prodigy Island, Neverland Ranch, or whatever you want to call it, I don't necessarily know anything about those events. But one of the big criticisms of Covenant, aside from the fact that it devolved into a bad ripoff of Alien, which this series seems to be following in its proud footsteps, is you've got a crew that lands on an alien planet, and they all step off the spaceship. You know, the readings say everything is breathable, and they all walk out, no masks, no safety gear. In this case, you've got a ship that came from deep space carrying God knows what cargo, crash landing into a city. I mean, you talk about what happened on 9/11 and all that stuff. They at least sent the firemen in with hazmat suits. These people are walking with no face coverings, no respirators or rebreathers or anything, no armor practically. It doesn't make any sense. Now, I'm sure at some point there's going to be speculation of like, oh, well, they were sent in so they could become hosts to this thing. I don't buy it, because that would take a level of calculation on Boy's part or Wayland Yutani, because they're kind of like at war with each other. We've seen that kind of manipulation in other shows, but in a more controlled kind of environment. This thing, first of all, you're sending child synths in. Forget about if they get destroyed by the aliens and get loose. They might just, as we're kind of seeing in these first two episodes, just cower in the corner and not know what to do as these things run right past them and take over the bodies of the other humans that are, in this apartment building or on that crew. It reminds me of Poor Things, a movie I know everybody loves, but it's the same thing. You take a mad scientist who puts the brain of a child into an adult's body, and you see what happens. And what happens is you get like that Star Wars Skeleton Crew show, but set in the world of Alien, but not nearly as entertaining. I don't want to see kids going up against xenomorphs, even if they are adults. That's kind of twisted. And to your point, Jeff, if you're going to make them kids, make them smart or resilient or something. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm going to be watching 6 more episodes of people crying.
Well, go ahead, Jeff. Mark. Well, I was going to say the big picture, and I thought a little bit about this since watching it and since talking to you earlier today, Ian. So for give me just sort of this a bigger picture thought here. But I think in some respects, this show is almost like a new poster child for all the kind of things that are wrong in some respects in Hollywood. And I don't mean to put all that on one thing, but this, to your point about, I'm glad you didn't sort of have the chart to show, because I, as a viewer and a fan of this franchise, as well as a film fan, let alone a critic, I'm tired of those kind of, well, we haven't created this slot yet in this chapter. in the order of it. And I don't know why with studios and really talented people, whether it's Noah Hawley or whomever else, they feel the need to fill in these gaps. It's the same with Star Wars and all that. I don't think there's a fanboy service out there. They're saying, well, I want to know what happened to Anakin when he was 16 versus 26. I don't care. He turned into Darth Vader. He was defeated and he felt bad about it at the end and he died. Let's move on with other Star Wars stories. Same with Star Trek. You got to get past Kirk. You got to get past the IP. Now, here's the interesting, and I'm just going to say this, not that I'm auditioning for the second season of this, but wouldn't it have been more interesting if you started out and you have like this boy genius whose name should be Boyd, not boy. Like, oh, he's a boy genius and he's cavalier. Oh, Noah, please, your strategy is showing. But what if he was starting out by saying, you know what the problem corporate America is? And he's talking to 10 corporations who have all failed in space, is we keep sending humans in to fight and these primitive weapons, and they can't beat the xenomorphs. And what we want to use the xenomorphs is for, numbers of things, like they can be weapons for us or whatever the hell else we want from them. So here's what we're going to do. We've got this whole new system of synthetic bodies that are going to go in there, or at least bring these people to Earth now, and these creatures to Earth now, and train them or whatever else. I mean, I'm not suggesting it become Starship Troopers, but something where we've at least figured out how to work with them, because the same story is told over and over again. They underestimate the xenomorph, and the xenomorph just slaughters everybody. It needs to be in the future where somebody has figured out how to sort of at least like, okay, the acid doesn't tear through these suits. There's no way you can hurt us. Or we're sending in these big robots that can't be defeated, like the Terminator and something else. Or we've harnessed a dozen predators to teach us how to fight them or something. But instead it's always like, well, let's go in and fill in this infinitesimal chapter in between these stories that nobody cares about, and it's going to end up with the same result. Because if they're this far back now, to get to Alien, they've learned nothing. This series will end with them learning nothing, and it starts all over again with Alien when they have a garbage scow pick it up rather than endangering, good qualified military until Aliens.
Well, it's become Mark, jump in here, but I want to pick up on something, Jeff, that you kind of just said. But Mark, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say that it's sad because there literally was a comic line recently, a limited story about a planet where they ended up having xenomorphs on, and the planet was an agricultural planet. It got nuked. It was so much irradiated that they couldn't send humans down. So they go out and find this rogue group of synthetic soldier, a platoon.
I read that series. Yeah.
And they send them down. And while they're down there, they learned that the xenomorph and the infection and whatnot modified some of the humans that took as a host. So one of the hosts is a queen, but she's like a queen human hybrid that can control it was fascinating. I mean, it was one of those things where I'm reading this going, this would make a great story. Or even with the TV show, and I know it may not be action packed, I find the world, and I found it in Romulus, and I know folks, some folks here did not care for Romulus. I liked a lot of the bits of Romulus that were hinted at and inferred that, maybe the corporations did know the whole time about the xenomorphs, and that they sent the, some of the holes, or that they at least tried to tie the prequels in with this. And that was fine. But I like this idea, but there's so much interesting corporate intrigue with the companies competing with one another. They start to get into it at the beginning of this show, where they start talking about what companies actually own which countries and the moon and and I'm like, for me personally, as a fan, I'd be interested to hear about stories of the other, like an arms race, and seeing the companies. And instead of being told by perspective of folks on the ground encountering a xenomorph again in a dark corridor, again with an egg, again, I want to see corporate greed. I want to see this interest. I want to see them starting to pull strings and start, give me some scenes with battles and war. But I'm like sitting here going, there's this fascinating corporate war going on basically amongst these competing companies that involve people and biological weapons, that I think there's a lot you could tap into there that they touched on in the prequels. Those were my parts that I really enjoyed with the prequels, and that, the bio arms race they're trying to do in that's intriguing.
It is, and you almost could do an entire series about that without the alien branding.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I think one of the problems that I'm seeing here is it's just more of what they're trying to do with these prequel series, and it still just raises more questions than it answers. And it's the alien prequel series and TV shows and movies are becoming the slasher movie conceit where it's like, oh, we're at a cabin in the woods, but we don't get any cell service. These things, like if you go the two movies that were not on that chart, the timeline chart, were Alien versus Predator and Alien Requiem.
Requiem.
I don't think
AVP
those were
Requiem. Yeah,
right. They probably didn't count those because they were technically Alien Predator movies, but it's still the case of, on Earth way before any of this stuff was happening, because I think those took place in like the 2000s. They were contemporary to when they were filmed. They uncovered in Antarctica or someplace ancient temple that was a breeding ground for xenomorphs that the predators would train on. And you have a survivor girl character there, but again, that was another site that I think got blown up or something. You've got the same thing with Requiem. There's a small town they got out, and that was blown up. Here, because this takes place 2 years before Alien, and yet no one seems to know anything about these xenomorphs on planet Earth, because surely the crew of the Nostromo, unless they'd been out there for like several decades or something and never got the memo, people would have been talking about it. The people in Aliens, which was 57 years after that, would have known about that thing that happened 59 years earlier. It would have been the talk of the planet. So I'm only imagining that this series, whether it's 1 season or 2 seasons or 3, can only end with this whole island being nuked and there's some kind of info blackout before anybody can send the word that there are aliens on the planet. Now, we do know from the movie Aliens, because it's in Ripley's trial when she gets back to Earth, she's like, this, the lady said, this xenomorph, this creature you've described, is unlike anything that we've seen in like 367 surveyed worlds or something. So there is alien life out there, but nothing like we've encountered in this, probably nothing like these other beasts that have come back on the Maginot. But again, it's not moving the story forward. It's just planting more business in the timeline. That I go back to my overall problem with prequel series, especially when they get this dense, is generations from now, when people hear about Alien as a concept, as a franchise, they're going to be thinking about the greatness of Alien and Aliens, but they're going to want to start at the beginning so they don't miss anything. So they're going to be starting at like Prometheus and Covenant and this. And by the time they get to Alien, my biggest fear is they're going to think, oh, this movie just ripped off the opening scene of the TV show that I watched from a few years ago, except now it's dull and boring because it takes 3 times as long for the pods to open up. The visual poetry is just sacrificed for a McDonald's drive-through experience. It's just, it's upsetting, and I'm not getting anything from this series at this point that gives me hope that it's all going to be worth it in the end.
I have a question for both of you as fans of sci-fi and horror and good storytelling in movies, let alone good television. What is the obsession? The reason that we constantly are getting these origin stories. I mean, we were talking earlier today, Ian, about, they've kind of gotten the Dexter resurrection better than the sequels they've done, but they're still doing a prequel about Dexter becoming Dexter when he was a teen. Who cares? We've had some of that in the original series when he's talking with his father, who is kind of this consciousness, this advice that he keeps around in his head as internal conversations, even though his father is dead. But that's a fine conceit. I don't understand why they can't move forward with this. To me, if I was a studio head at 20th Century Fox or Disney, I guess it's Disney now, I'd be saying, why are we constantly showing that human beings are just idiots in the face of these xenomorphs? And the only thing we ever really challenge them is by trickery, luck, or having a predator. Why can't we say, it's 50 years after the last one, and they finally figured out how to contain the xenomorph? I don't know what that is. That's where Noah Hawley can be brilliant and come up with something that I haven't come up with yet. Or what are they being used for? Are they being used as special soldiers themselves or weapons? Are they learning to control? Or is there another alien that has come out of the 367 known galaxies that's worse than this, that is threatening it because they can shut down the electricity. I don't know, I'm just riffing now, but where the xenomorph becomes something else. But show me the future. Show me the future of the Empire, the Federation, the world that the xenomorph takes place in. Don't constantly go back and tell the same story with the same old characters when they were younger or 50 years ago or whatever. I don't get that. Is it studio executives who know nothing and don't have any imaginations, and the only thing they can understand is, oh, that's like the first one, I remember that. Oh, aren't I smart? Duh.
No, I think. Go ahead, Mark.
Sorry. No, I think it's just that I think the closest series that you have gotten that has done something like this right is Star Wars Andor. The second season of Star Wars Andor, as a Star Wars fan, that's what I want to see. If you want to do some kind of prequel thing, don't give me throwbacks. I mean, you can give little hints here and there and maybe a cameo or a character pop up, but give me the story that people just briefly referenced in the others, but we don't know any more details about, but it was like a significant. They did a story record, which I'm still trying to get my father to send to me from my uncle's collection. Remember in Jedi, they had Han Solo go, not that. It was, Han Solo in Empire, I think it was the bounty hunter we ran into on Ord Mantell has definitely changed his mind on things. And there's a record story about that adventure. That internet, give me something like that. Or in this, if you want to do a legacy, fine. Give me a perspective of Weyland-Yutani knowing of xenomorphs, like they hinted at in Romulus, doing this experiment, and something's gone wrong to where they've lost all of their specimens or whatever. But now they run across this message from the Nostromo going, hey, we've encountered this planet. They know aliens are on this planet, and they send them that, give me that other story of stuff
that's
going
the same
on.
story too, Mark. What I'm asking for is, we've learned nothing about these xenomorphs in 10 films and shows now. They have to be some sort of education. Otherwise, we're literally watching the same movie over and over again. It might as well be Jason Voorhees, because all this is setting people up for the xenomorph to acid or attack down.
Well, no, that's what I was talking about, though, is that they know a lot about them, but they lose their sample at least. But don't ever show it in a Nostromo. You just get the radio message, and then
but you're still putting it in the middle of all that. Well, go 100 years out and show me how 100 years out with synth and all these different things that are now common among us, they're dealing with this. What's the new role for the xenomorph, other than Jason?
Well, I think I want to answer your first question, Jeff, and I also want to kind of piggyback on it with my answer to the problem. The reason I think we keep going back to prequels is the whole idea of nostalgia. You've got a pre-existing kind of style book and template for these movies. It's the same thing with Star Wars. People lost their minds, like, oh my God, Hayden Christensen's going to have hair just like they had back in the 70s because he's going to be like the adult version of whatever. That was a conversation back in 20 years ago. But it's comfortable. You don't have to worry about stepping out into original territory and coming up with something that's going to necessarily turn off the fans by giving them something unfamiliar. You're saying,
you're asking very little of the audience, and
exactly.
They're a little comfortable with that.
Right. My answer to all of this, and it'll never happen, because much like Weyland-Yutani, Disney, Fox, Hulu, whatever, just keeps they just want more and more and more eyeballs and cash and IP under their belt. Just stop making this stuff. The story's been told. Alien was never conceived as a movie that would have a sequel. Mm-hmm. Aliens was the perfect sequel because Cameron said, we're going to make the same movie. Now, I don't know if this story is apocryphal or not, but he went into the Fox executive's office for his entire pitch was he had a whiteboard and he wrote Alien on it. And then he wrote an S and then drew a vertical sign mark through it saying, basically it's Alien and here's a dollar sign. It's a license to print money.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Fortunately, it wasn't just a cash grab. It ended up being one of the finest sci-fi finest and influential sci-fi films of all time. But at the end, it had a nice happy ending. You could have left it there. They keep going back, and some of the results were interesting in that original quadrilogy, but then they started getting into the prequel territory, and it's not satisfying. It's not interesting. It's convoluted because Ridley Scott's not going to finish the trilogy that he started with. I hated Alien Covenant, but I loved that kind of spooky ending of him flying off to that planet, do the experiments, and kind of tricking Catherine Waterston's character into, falling asleep in the pod. It's eerie. I didn't necessarily need to see the follow-up movie, but we're not going to get it regardless. We're starting over with Romulus, and now that's getting a sequel that is going to have to somehow track to the movie Aliens. This movie has to track into Alien without crossing over any boundaries that would convolute the timeline, but we already have in the first 2 episodes problems with the timeline, because our Morrow character, when we see the big reveal of him in the mother control room, he turns around. It's the one cool moment in the entire 2.5-hour premiere that I thought was interesting, was there's another crew member banging on the doors we've seen 1,000 times. This, let me in, it's out in the hallway, it's gonna get me. And he goes over, we see his knuckles shift, and he's got like silver, almost painted on knuckles, and they shift, and a freaking blowtorch comes out of his hand.
Finger becomes a blowtorch.
Yes, and he seals the door so that she can't get in, and then she's, of course, eaten, and the monster breaks in, everything. He gets into this little escape hatch, which is under the floor, which is very convenient. But then later, Morrow traps a xenomorph in this weird kind of egg sac. At first, I thought it was Predator technology, almost the net, but it had like this kind of like an egg sac over it, and it captures the xenomorph. I'm like, okay, where's the blowtorch thing and where's this egg sac thing? Because in any of the other movies that came after this, that would have been really helpful technology to have, unless, of course, Morrow was the one experiment Weyland-Yutani did with this technology, and it got blown up in the inevitable, cover up the mystery of what happened here so we can move the franchise forward.
The spray came out of the gun he had, which also shot the electrical bolt that actually stunned the xenomorph, which again would have came in handy a number of times. And you would even think that, okay, then in Aliens, which is 57 years after the first one, they would have had given the Marines saying, hey, you're going down there, you may encounter something, take these weapons instead. That way they could, keep, you could have done it's the same problem that you run into with a lot of these prequel stuff, is they come up with something interesting and you go, where the hell was that in this one? I mean, Enterprise, for crying out loud, Enterprise messed with its timeline. The first episode, they had Klingons in Iowa going into a corn silo when they weren't, it had every single Trek person going,
what?
Well, but here's the thing. I mean, Enterprise is 25 years ago now. What we're dealing with now is internet culture and people who grew up with a world full of fan theories that are accessible at the click of a button. And so people have to know that this stuff is going to be a problem. Noah Hawley has to be smart enough to know that he's introducing things. Now, again, and we're going to wrap this up because I'm breaking my own rule about keeping this short, but it's too good a conversation to have. But at the end of 8 episodes, there has to be some kind of a resolution or an answer. Either that, or maybe it's going to be in season 2. If there is not a season 2, that's going to be a big problem, because we're going to end up right where we were at the end of Covenant, which is like, what happened to XXX? But if there isn't a resolution, if there's no attention to the astute diehard Alien fans' concerns, questions, passion for this story, then it just does go to prove that Disney, Fox, Hulu just cares about the money and the shiny object filmmaking and storytelling. I mean, one of the things that annoyed the crap out of me is, and it's a meme already in the last 24 hours, the freeze frame of Wendy, and right next to her is the Scrat from Ice Age. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, what the hell is this? And I caught it out of the corner of my eye because I think I was jotting a note down or something when that happened. I'm like, I had to go back and rewind that because Ice Age factors into the Alien universe as a classic cartoon that people are going to watch 100 years from now. People forgot that was a thing 5 years after it came out, right? But they also, with the tortured Peter Pan metaphors, they actually show the Disney Peter Pan film on the operating table when they're doing the transfer of consciousness at the beginning. And cynical old bastard like me is seeing through this. Oh, it's not a coincidence. What it is Ice Age is a Fox cartoon. Peter Pan is a Disney cartoon, and Fox was bought by Disney. They're all one big happy family. So it's an IP shareholder slideshow plopped in the middle of an alien story. This is nonsense.
Yeah, and a diet of Easter eggs has no nutritional value.
Well, and there's that. Well, and one of the biggest problems I had with the show in general, and it's something that's just basic filmmaking, especially in sci-fi, if you're dealing with spaceships and such, I had no clue where anyone was at any time in this show. Like nowhere. I was like, wait, are they on the ship? No, they're in the hotel now. Okay, they're on a floor. Okay, where'd the other people? At least the people in the hotel you could kind of piece together. But on the ship, there was no semblance of continuity of image at all because we didn't spend enough time on the ship. And I think what really robbed me was the fact of they spent a lot of the first episode introducing us to the crew of this ship, doing an introduction similar to what we got in Alien, and they all get eliminated like within a half hour.
Why bother with that?
Why
Exactly. Why the misdirect?
Time?
Because they had to have the red herring of the one creepy looking guy on the crew who was like standing there watching the one girl sleep and like, oh, I bet that's the android. But it turns out it was Morrow all along, who wasn't even a suspect. And it's just this rug pulling. Now again, if they come back to this crew and we have a flashback episode to what happened on the Maginot and these characters become important again, I'll eat my words. Not necessarily because I have no confidence it'll be good, but at least there'll be a reason for this whole setup. But I mean, in another month and a half we'll know, but I don't know where we're going from here.
But I mean, to your point, Ian, when you've got 8 hours and that seems like a lot of time, but when you're wasting it with people walking through dark corridors, that is just filler and taking lots of time. And it's like, well, we built these sets, I guess we have to show them off or not show them off because it's so dark. It becomes ludicrous to waste time on characters that are not going to be important. And frankly, we could have just started off with, okay, Morrow is, got the girl banging at the door saying, let me in, it's gotten loose. And that's all we need to know as he fills out a little thing like, okay, I've secured the fact that we've got the Xenomorph ready. The crew is dead, but I fulfilled the mission. And that's done in 30 seconds. And then you get into the characters so you understand the children more and why they're being transferred into the synthetics and how, according to this brilliant guy, this is such a great thing for him, for Boy Cavalier to do, because he's changing the way soldiers work. Now they can be in the bodies of, developed soldiers, muscular and adult-wise, but they've got this combination of genius kids as well as computer systems, and he can monitor them like he's watching them almost through a video camera in their eye. Okay, but none of that's happening. Instead, we get 20 minutes of this ship going down when it's literally something they should have covered in 2 minutes and been done with it. And that's eating away at the 8 hours.
Here's how you open this series. Cut out that whole ship part in the beginning. That's 10, 15 minutes with a crew that doesn't care. Open it with the shot of the island and introduce us immediately to little girl getting her consciousness transferred. And then you get her following her brother, cut to a mysterious ship coming out of nowhere and crashing into a city. You're not quite sure. You don't need that first 10 minutes of introducing and spending time with characters who are going to be.
What the ship is along with those kids.
Right. Leave it mystery. Start it with the island, which you could easily cut And you could easily just start with the way they wrote this with the island and the brother. Now you have this ship coming out. You don't know what this ship is. You know it belongs to Weyland Wutali because they mention it while they're on the ship. You know it's carrying specimens because they mention it during episode 2. You get all that information that they wasted 10 to 15 minutes of the first episode on
maybe
in the
half an
next
hour.
episode.
Right, and part of it is a trouble of marketing, because there's the premise of the show is out there, but it very well could have been the idea of introducing this search and rescue mission. You know, there's a xenomorph on board somehow, but maybe at the end, the cliffhanger at the end of this first one is you open up this chamber and it's it's the face hugger and then all these other capsules of different species, and they're all empty and broken loose and whatever, and that sets up your story. But the beginning of this, I mean, the spaceship crash landing, it's just this CGI nonsense. It looks terrible. The bit where the hermit, the doctor guy, gets out of the transport and he's like looking around, I was having flashbacks to those terrible Star Wars TV shows where they used the volume. I mean, none of that looked real. It looked like a guy looking, being directed to look around as this video game is projected all around him. It should have been a horrifying, practical recreation of the opening scene from Lost, which I never watched that show beyond the pilot. I don't know why, but I watched the pilot twice because I was so impressed by that, by all the terrible things that were going on with that plane crash and all the incidental things, like someone getting sucked into an engine because they were standing too close because they were in shock. Where is that? Where is almost an Easter egg scene of people are trying to scoop bodies out, but then you see like a little critter like scurrying out of the background, like that's we're going to deal with that in season 2.
Instead we get the cat, which harkens back to what Ripley saved from the first movie, but this time it's already been alienized, and then the eyeball pops out with multiple legs. Oh, see, we've already sort of killed the expectation there. I'll tell you one last thing I'm just going to say, because I love what you said about nostalgia. It got derided in some respects at the time, and I don't think they're held up as classical movies, but I think what 20th Century Fox did with the Planet of the Apes franchise way back in the day was much more fresh and exciting in the way that they switched it around. They went from humans on a Planet of the Apes to the apes on a planet of humans being enslaved, and how we got there from one film to the other was pretty good. I mean, I'm not sure that the last one worked particularly well, but the second, third, and fourth were interesting extensions of it that I think we're not playing off of just the same old, but trying to make it really into a chaptered science fiction story that sort of twisted and turned a lot. So the audience was finding something rather than just the nostalgia of the same old all the time.
I think I was a big fan of the last Apes movie. I don't necessarily need to see more, but the trilogy that from the last 15 years, the only one I didn't care for was the second one,
right?
Which seems to be like really popular among people. But Apes is an interesting
back
one.
To the 60s, like I'm talking about the original.
I was thinking about
the redo of these were, I think, actually underrated. I think they were much better than most people assumed. But the original, you had the Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Conquest, and Battle for the Planet of the Apes. I mean, they did different things with it. I mean, even the third one where they basically have Cornelius and Zira crash land onto modern Earth. And what would we do if they came back? And can they tell the story about what happened to man and how that then leads into conquest? I mean, there was a smartness to that, and there was a smartness to what you just referenced, Ian, that is missing here. So Fox has had an experience in doing this, but they so far seem to be missing it here.
Well, and they did it with Kingdom. It's why Kingdom worked for me. When they said they were doing a fourth Apes movie, I'm like, huh? But then when you find out, no, this is like 100 years. I mean, that whole epic, that trilogy, this is a completely different time period. And while it wasn't quite as solid, it still was interesting. At least it was like, okay, they're doing something different. We're seeing how society has kind of leveled off, and they're afraid. They're so afraid. And unfortunately, even though this is rated R, I'm going to say it right now. I've discovered there's a Disney rated R. There's a rated R and there's a Disney rated R.
Have it all happen in the dark, and then it's not really bloody. This is a Disney
rated R. While you do have your rated R elements, it's not shocking. It's not heavy. It doesn't give you that visceral like thing that you usually have with rated R films that are violent like this, because you don't stay on anything long enough to really get any type of impact.
Well, it's also kind of puzzling because the bit where the Morrow ties up the two guards against that pole, it was, again, it's another dark scene, but it looked like there's a little worm that
that's
gets
a worm,
lowered onto the into the tunic of the one guard. First of all, it looked like it was almost like a Warner Brothers cartoon where it's being lowered on a little fish hook. I'm like, what's that all about?
Yeah, who's doing that?
Right, but there's like a whole 5 minutes where those guys are tied up together and they're talking like what's going on. I think Morrow actually talks to them or something. So the worm is like in the guy's tunic. He doesn't seem to feel it until it comes time for the scene where it's going to get into his body and crawl around. Like, what was it doing for the rest of it? Like, take a nap? It's the reason I think Apes works in its various incarnations and Alien doesn't, is Apes is inherently a movie franchise about ideas. I mean, that shocker of an ending was meant to send people out of the theaters like, oh my God, what is this? What are the implications of this, for humanity? And, are we going to blow ourselves up and all this other stuff?
Right.
Some of the sequels got goofy, but they were still about ideas. Alien is essentially a
monster movie.
As a monster haunted house movie in space. It was great in 79. They militarized it in 86. But then they keep trying to add this loftiness to it. They're building on top of a structure that they've already run out of all the ideas that they could do in the comics and the video games and the movies. So my solution to all this is just stop. Find the next Ridley Scott, find the next Dan O'Bannon, and give them the money, the seed money to do something original. I'm going to stop after I read some comments from Sujiro, who popped into the chat. Into the comments. So, wait, hold on a second. The Xenomorphs are angry because they don't have eyes like other beings. They do have alien vision, though.
And they couldn't watch that sexy Sydney Sweeney commercial. Those poor bastards.
They had good Xenomorphs.
Nice.
They almost gave this new show to the makers of the new War of the Worlds. That would have been better, I'll bet. Do one movies to end all 3 movie series. The Xeno and a Predator are sent to a Pandora planet. Oh, I would so watch that.
That's hilarious.
Just mowing down those blue bastards.
Yes. Here's what I think of your tree.
You can't live like this, baby, in hate. Oh man. Then the humans have
plug that tail. Go ahead, sir.
Then the humans have to nuke the planet from above, and the humans get taken out. Also, then we make all kinds of new sci-fi.
Very funny, Sujiro.
In the 53 spaceships,
there it is.
Each will have a separate A story. The spaceships will be a B story.
There's the shell. Roll the dice. Waiting for it.
The show was worth it because
it was
some great ideas there, and I guarantee you, Sujiro, 53 spaceships is going to be better than at least the first 2 episodes of Alien Earth.
And I know we're going long, but here's the thing: is we know original sci-fi stories are out there, whether or not you really that still have elements that are familiar, but it's still presenting an interesting story. And we've seen it in the past. We've seen it with The Arrival, with the story with the aliens and dealing with language. I loved that movie because while it had familiar sci-fi elements, it was an intriguing story. Annihilation, I think, is an excellent. I enjoyed it. I know some people didn't, but I enjoyed it quite a bit because it was at least someone trying to do something a bit different. Even if it didn't work for everyone, they were still doing something different. It reminds me that, like Annihilation and An Arrival and a few others, of the old paperbacks I used to find my dad had on the shelf because he loved reading sci-fi, and he'd have all these weird, like, they were, you read them and they were just alien stories in space. They didn't have hardly any human characters in them, but there was a myth series that was done. There was all kinds of different stories, and you look at the covers and you'd read the stories and they were just completely alien sci-fi stories that had those nuggets of familiarity, but just interesting out there stories. And not all of them are good, but at least they're doing something original, which would then spark someone else to go and build off of that.
And I would even be, I don't like it when they do this, but if we could at least get some new sci-fi blood out there where they can take the Alien franchise and just have it co-opt one of these other stories like you're talking about, Mark, and give us something new in this universe. I'm still an advocate for let's just scrap all this licensed
Oh,
IP
yeah.
nonsense and start over fresh, but I think the studios, probably rightfully so, because when they put out original content, people are afraid to go spend their money to see it, especially because like, well, I can watch it in 6 weeks, I can rent it, it'll be on HBO Max or whatever, so I'm not going to invest in this. I mean, we've talked about Companion endlessly on this show because that was a movie that I think deserved way more respect and attention, but it, you know, it failed, and it's an injustice. But we're going to talk about more of this next week. This was a special 1 hour plus edition of Say No More Xenomorph, where I think we kind of got our overall thesis and concerns with the series out of the way, along with some good analysis and synopses of these first 2 episodes. Next week, we are going to be talking about just the 3rd episode, because I think they're, you know, releasing one at a time through the end of the series. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk spoilers, kind of collect our overall hypotheses and things leading up to the finale, and then we'll do a big old retrospective and see if we were all mistaken here at the outset, if we should have trusted in Noah Hawley all along, because he delivered a tour de force of sci-fi horror television. I'm skeptical, but I'm hopeful, because that's all we can do in this world. All right, I'm going to let everyone get out of here. I would like to say thank you to my esteemed Earth's Mightiest critics. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat, Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of Special Mark Productions and the Spoiler Room Podcast, and of course, Jeff York of the Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists. We will have a rotating series of guests here on this Say No More Xenomorph series in the next 6 weeks or so. So please join us back here on Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. We'll be here talking about the good stuff. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Join our Patreon if you are so moved to do so. And and also check out all of our Earth's Mightiest critics. Information is down below in the description. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much. Take care, and watch the series on Hulu, and then come back and watch our analysis of it. Do that first, because otherwise it won't make any sense. Not that the show makes sense to begin with. But bye.